Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to be showing you exactly how I make a knife handle step by step. So first I'm going to pick the sides of the scales that look the best. I'm going to just make sure they're totally flat. Now on this knife, I didn't know if I could show the engraving I did. I did contact the guy and he said I was fine showing it, so later in the video I will show the engravings. I've got different sized holes in here. My two holes that are for the pins are 3/16, and the smaller holes are just to make it easier for the epoxy to grab onto the knife. But first I just use the grinder to make sure everything's flat and smooth, and then after that I went to hand sanding and just made sure again that it was really even. And after I'm done, you can see that it's a lot flatter than it was before. So next, I want to make sure you pick the sides that you want showing on the outside. So when you clamp them and drill them, you're not going to be able to switch them. So you have to decide right now which ones lay the flattest and which one, if the grain looks better on one side, you want to make sure you use that. Before I clamp, I want to make sure I know how far I want the scale to go. So I pick the spot where I want it to be. I'm going to go a little bit farther, and that way I can round the handle and have it look just how I want. If you go right to the spot you want, you're going to have a square handle. I like to round it. And when you're clamping, you want to make sure that your tang doesn't move around too much, but also you don't want to clamp too hard that you crack the wood. And when you start drilling, you want to make sure you select a slow speed. If you go too fast, you can crack the wood or burn it. So you want to make sure it's nice and slow so you don't have any issues. After you get done drilling on the underside, you'll notice a lot of times that it's raised a little bit, so you want to make sure those are flat so that when you do epoxy it, the tang's on there, it's not raised up at all. Well, these are 3/16 pins, and I just drilled 3/16 holes, and they don't quite fit, so you're going to need to make the pins a little bit smaller. I'm also going to, we don't need these really long pins, so I'm going to cut them down for the right size. So first I'm just going to go to the grinder and really lightly press on the scales just to make those raised parts flat. And then on the pins, I'm going to be at a really aggressive angle at first just to make a point. It doesn't take too long, and then you can test it in the scales to make sure that they do fit how you want. And you can see that the point goes in, but it's still too thick, so I'm going to be just getting the diameter a little bit smaller. And I do a little bit at a time and just keep checking until I get the right fit. You don't want them to be too small either, so you just want to go slow. And the scales are too long, so I marked where I want to cut them. Just cut them off with my bandsaw. Then I can get them closer fit on the grinder. But marking, that's the front. So now the part that I had a little bit too long, I can round and get it just the right shape and size for the knife. So now that the scales are all shaped, I can get ready to epoxy. So first I need to clean everything to make sure there's no dust or debris. This will ensure that I get a nice tight fit. So I'm using G-Flex epoxy. If you want me to do a review on this epoxy and why I use it, let me know in the comments. When you're putting the epoxy on the scales, the one thing that you want to look out for is you put it on the right side. So what I like to do, you see on that upper scale, I've got a T for the top, and I've got B on the bottom on the underside of this one. If you put it on the wrong side, you're gonna have to get all that epoxy off with acetone. It takes a long time. Well, the scales are all put together. I can start adding the clamps. The only thing you really want to watch out for is you don't want to clamp too tight. One of my first knives I made, I clamped a little too tight and I heard a big crack. And there was no way to fix it, so I just had to start all over. I also put paper towels in between the scales and the clamps, so if there's any epoxy on the scales, they don't get stuck together. So 48 hours later, everything's all dried. You can see the etching I did. This is a peregrine falcon that I made for a falconer. I'll put a link in the description if you want to see how I made that knife. Okay, so now I'm going to be using the grinder just to get the pins so they're totally flat, and also do any of the final shaping before I move on to the hand sanding. After I finish on the grinder, there's little areas that I can't get, so I switched to my Dremel to finish off any of those little details. My favorite part is the hand sanding. It really completes the knife, brings it all together. I start with 180 grit and I work my way up to 2000. Each grit you move up makes it look a little bit better. Your goal is just to get all the scratches out from the previous grit. So here's my last one at 2000 grit before I move on to the polish. The hand sanding's all done. Now I'm going to be using boiled linseed oil. This will polish and protect the wood, and it just makes it look really good. This really brings out the grain. And I end up usually doing about 2 coats of polish. Sometimes I do 3. I just look to see some woods soak a little bit more of the polish up. Here's another handle I recently made. This is made of acrylic. I usually just do 1 coat with acrylic. You don't really need more than that. This was a custom knife I made for someone. I've never done a handle like this. It turned out really cool. Alright guys, thanks for watching. If you found this video helpful, make sure you give it a like. Subscribe to see more knife making videos, and I will see you next time.